Good morning. Hope you guys are doing good this morning. My name's John, and you're riding with me on my morning drive to work. Well, it was a pretty eventful weekend in politics. Maybe not with any riveting excitement, but Rick Santorum, not surprisingly, ran away with Kansas. Now, we know that Kansas is probably the biggest Bible thumper state in the Union. And that's saying something. Because, you've got Mississippi and Texas and some other wacky states. So, obviously, that's a bold statement when you're saying that Kansas is like that. But it's evidenced because Rick Santorum, this is likely the pinnacle of his campaign, because 30-point landslide is, that's pretty unheard of in this race so far. They've all been relatively close. I mean, there's been some double-digit wins, but nothing by 30 points. So there was that. That was Rick Santorum's big surge, whatever. I think he shot his load on that one. Mitt Romney, on the other hand, kept pace somewhat, won Wyoming, Dick Cheney territory. Woo! So, as far as the GOP primary goes, that's about the extent of it, and as usual, Ron Paul was an asterisk, an afterthought. Sorry, all you Ron Paul supporters. It's just not happening. You're SOL. In other news, I don't know how many of you out there saw Game Change over the weekend. It was a premiere on Saturday night at 9 p.m. Game Change, it's based on the book, which I haven't read because I'm really not that concerned, or I'm really not that interested in the topic per se, but I thought I'd watch the movie because it had a really good cast. And it got good reviews. In my opinion, the production itself and the cast was amazing. But I've kind of got a couple issues with it. One is, Julianne Moore, even though she was amazing in that, they made her look just like Sarah Palin. I didn't think from the preview she was going to look nearly as much like Sarah Palin as she did. And as the movie progressed, especially, man, it was almost like you were watching Palin. It was great, and they did a good job of that. But the one thing that she didn't do a great job on was, at times, there was glimpses of it where she would get the speaking patterns just right, and the voice was close, but they didn't make her voice irritating enough. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I didn't necessarily want to sit through a 2-hour movie where Sarah Palin was droning that freaking cat scratch voice where it sounds like there's a bag of cats sealed up fighting their way out. I mean, her voice is just terrible. She freaking really grates on the nerves. It's like nails on a chalkboard. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, or for those of you who her voice isn't that big of a deal to you, then whatever. But all I know is that bitch gets on my nerves. I cannot freaking stand that shit. She is just a dipshit in a Corvette, freaking about to cause an accident because he can't freaking wait. She just gets on my nerves. So anyway, Julianne Moore did a good job. The voice was just not quite screechy and annoying enough, but that's all right. The other thing I had an issue with was Ed Harris was pretty much Ed Harris. He didn't sound very much like John McCain. They could have done a lot better job of making him sound right too. The sound people on that, sound editors or the sound mixers or whoever was in charge of the sound, was subpar. I'll be nice and call it subpar, because that's what it was. I mean, it was just not the best in my opinion. Everything else was great though, and even though they could have been harsher because I think she deserves it, I think they took it easy on her at some points in the movie. But what are you going to do? Just the way it is. It was done by Playtone, which is Tom Hanks, Tom Hanks is a classy guy, so maybe he just didn't want to completely dump on Sarah Palin. But I mean, it is what it is. I mean, the lady's got issues. She's absolutely not a prepared candidate. I think I touched briefly on that in the last episode, where I talked about how if she were any kind of a serious candidate, or wanted to be a serious candidate, that she would work at it. But just like in the movie, I mean, the movie pretty much backs up exactly what I was saying on Friday, which is that she just doesn't want to put in the work. And I mean, there was times in the movie when she was just sitting there, she wouldn't even respond to the person that she's working with that's trying to prep her. She's like zoning people out or texting on her phone. I mean, then she went into the Katie Couric interview with like no prep because she was getting so overwhelmed with information because she was so damn stupid to begin with, that's what ended up happening. She just did it to herself. So I mean, it's not like, the woman was victimized by anybody or the gotcha media or any of that happy horse shit that she likes to always say. I mean, even Steve Schmidt, the campaign manager, at one point is like, look, it wasn't the liberal media, it wasn't your prep, the person that was trying to prep you, it wasn't anybody, it was you are the reason why that interview went badly. Sorry for the pause, but if you see, I don't know if you can see it or not, this truck in front of me on the upper right corner, or in the right window, they have a big vinyl sign there that says American healthcare sucks. Amen, brother. And that's why we need single payer healthcare, universal healthcare, not Obamacare. Not that I don't like it. I mean, Obamacare is a good first step. I'm not a Republican, so I'm not trying to repeal that, but Obamacare, actually it's the Affordable Care Act, has helped a lot of people and will continue to as the benefits keep kicking in. But and myth debunking soundbite for the day, Obamacare was not going to cost $1 trillion. It is going to reduce the deficit. According to the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, a nonpartisan organization, all they do is provide numbers and statistics. There's no partisanship to it. Even though now, because the Republicans can't stand facts, they are now accusing the CBO of being partisan. So it's like, these guys, Jesus himself could come down to earth and tell them something is a certain way, and if it doesn't agree with what their agenda is or what Fox News says, they'll call Jesus a liar. So that's just kind of the way it is. But that's how it kind of goes. But the CBO is saying it's still set to reduce the budget by $138 billion. So granted, it's not as much as they originally thought it was going to reduce it, but on the other hand, it just seems a lot like Obama and a lot of the Democratic policies that we implement from an economic standpoint or from a money saving standpoint always seem to overperform. Now, you could say, oh, well, the stimulus didn't overperform, but yeah, it did, because the stimulus, despite the fact that it was comprised of 33, or actually I think 40% tax cuts, which is one of the least stimulative things that you can do, unemployment being the most stimulative at a 6-to-1 return versus tax cuts, which I believe are about a 2-to-1 return, which is still decent, but it's just not getting the most bang for your buck from a stimulus standpoint. Despite the fact that it was 40%, it still saved, I believe it was upwards of 3 million jobs. And that's a big deal. But the problem is people don't think in terms of saving jobs. They think in terms of they want something they can get their fingers on, which if those 3 million jobs were lost, they'd be taking notice then, just like with bailouts. Yeah, I didn't like the bailouts. I especially didn't like the first stage of TARP that was implemented under Bush, because it basically released $350 billion to Hank Paulson with no strings. And when Elizabeth Warren, who was tasked with auditing where the money went, kept trying to find out where the money went, she was just basically had the door slammed in her face saying, don't worry about it. Even though Hank Paulson guaranteed, I believe it was $1 for dollar, a 1-to-1 return, and then it ended up being something more like 60 cents on the dollar return, which is not what we signed up for. But anyways, whatever. And then under the Obama administration, they released the other 350 billion, and every penny of that money has been accounted for and paid back with interest for the most part. I think there's still, I think, between 10 and 20 billion dollars that are outstanding, if I remember correctly. I could look it up and find out. If anybody really wants me to find out the exact numbers on that, email me at mymorningdrive@shredoftruth.com, and I'll be happy to look into it for you. Or if you have the numbers and could do that for me, that would be much appreciated. Again, it's mymorningdrive@shredoftruth.com. Shredoftruth.com is my website that I created as my wife and I decided that we needed to try to do something to further the grassroots movement in the country and to try to combat misinformation, and at the very least create another progressive echo chamber for the progressive media machine, which needs to be able to turn the volume up louder than Fox News, because Fox News is polluting the airwaves and filling people's heads full of lies and misinformation, as evidenced by some of my wife's relatives. Excuse me. My wife's cousin, who shall remain nameless at this point, she is seems like a nice lady, but completely ate up with Obama derangement syndrome and conservative personality disorder. She thinks that Obama shouldn't be president because of the whole birther thing. She's a big birther still. She's in the Orly Tates Club, which, in case any of you are unsure who Orly Tates is, she's the whack job that's been spearheading the birther movement since day one. Of course, then her male counterpart, Donald Trump, came along later, but then you don't hear anything from Donald Trump anymore. But now, of course, you hear from Joe Arpaio, the dumbass sheriff in Arizona, who's a known racial profiler and is under ethics violations and I think criminal investigation, if I'm not mistaken. He's got problems. But I think the reason why he's shoring up the birther investigation from his side is because the Justice Department he's under attack from the Justice Department for violations and other things. So my wife's cousin, getting back to her, she's a complete nut job birther, and then on top of that, she won't listen to anything. It's just nothing but Fox News nonsense, and it's like, how can you not pay attention to what the man has actually accomplished? I can understand if you don't agree with his viewpoints, but you need to give credit where credit is due. I mean, let's be rational, fact-based people here. Let's talk in facts and not in Fox News lies and misinformation, because Fox News, and the thing is, I mean, people just don't realize it, but Fox News is doing a terrible amount of damage. Because for one thing, I mean, if there's a civil war, another civil war, it's going to be, Fox News is going to have a big hand in it. They've gotten people so completely polarized and so consumed with the vitriol and the hatred that they spew on their network that it's just slowly or rapidly becoming more and more impossible to discuss things with Republicans without there being hate speech involved. And the thing is that she's supposed to be such a devout Christian and, God this and God that and Jesus, 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 but then she'll dispute nothing but hatred for Obama, saying he's a Muslim and hating on Muslims. And it's like, well, we shouldn't be hating on any religion in particular. There are plenty of Christian extremists that are just as bad as radical Islam. Not that I'm sticking up for radical Islam, they're pieces of shit too, but there's radical Christians, to me, they're worse just because they're domestic. And there's no reason for it. If you're a Christian, there's no reason why you should be so hateful. It's just like my wife's adopted family. Her brother and her adopted family was a convicted felon, had a criminal record as a younger man where, he was charged with arson at one point. He was charged with all different types of speeding with traffic violations because he used to do a lot of racing and building cars and stuff, which is fine. You're a young man. You're going to get in some trouble. I had my share of speeding tickets and racing issues too. But then he got nailed for running automatic assault weapons. And now he, he plays the victim, saying his constitutional rights were violated. Yeah, you're allowed to bear arms, but you're not allowed to distribute automatic weapons. State law prohibits automatic weapons. And I believe up until not long ago, there was assault weapons ban federally, but I think it's still illegal to have automatic weapons, or if not to have one, but to distribute them in Texas, especially with all the drug cartels and everything that are down there. The last thing they want are people stockpiling automatic weapons that could be sold to Mexico. So, I mean, I don't know how he's the victim in that case, but that was a long time ago. That was probably 20 years ago, maybe a little bit less than that, maybe like 18 years ago that happened. And now he's Mr. Born again Bible thumper, Bible scholar, Sunday school teacher, everything else, and is beyond reproach. Of course, he's really intelligent. Comes from my wife's adopted family. Her father's extremely intelligent. He's got like 3 degrees. Used to do missile design for Department of Defense through a contractor. And mom was a nurse. So he's pretty intelligent. He's pretty sharp. He does computer work for a living, and from all indications, he's really smart. But he's just a guy, just like I am, just a dude who's memorized a bunch of Bible verses. It's not like he's, he's the ordained one or anything, or he's divine. I mean, the thing that's maddening about it is that he acts like he's just above reproach, and like his shit doesn't stink, and that's your typical Christian demeanor. I mean, I mean, I'm used to it by now with these Christians that think they're just all that in a bag of chips because their religion makes them so. And I know we all know some Christians, especially some fake-ass Christians. But the funny thing about it is we got into a big tiff over the weekend on Facebook, and his wife actually removed my wife from the friends list because of it. And of course, we get this big long email calling us liberals and that we want to steal from other people and we don't want to take responsibility for our actions and all these other hateful things. Your typical conservative, right-wing, radical religious ideology being spewed at us, in the most hateful way possible, which is just so Christian, that's so Christian. And the other thing is, too, is over the years, we're lucky if we get a Christmas card from him or a phone call for my wife's birthday, maybe. Or her adopted mother has to call him and tell him, shame on you for not calling her for Christmas or birthday or whatever. So, I mean, the guy is such a freaking hypocrite, it's just disgusting. These Christians, and he's Mr. Christian. He's an exceptional Christian. How these asshole Republicans are. They just hide behind their religiosity, use it as a shield, and act like they're beyond reproach, even though that they're the worst offenders of treating their fellow man like shit. It's just disgusting. So, the reply back had all kinds of Bible verses in it that we looked up. And of course, they like to ridicule my wife for being an environmentalist, and I'm one too. So that pisses me off too. So I helped her reply back to this email diatribe that just went on forever, but deserved a response. The following response, though, is just going to be basically, I'm not going to continue. The following response, in so many words, is just going to be, we're not going to continue with this game of one-upsmanship. We're going to be the Christians here and end this, realizing that neither one of us are going to change the other's viewpoint, but that's what makes this country great. And the thing is he, twice in his email, he said that if we don't like certain things, we could leave the country. And that's the thing, is Republicans, it's a perfect microcosm of the Republican Party and the Republican mindset now, is it's so intolerant, which is not Christian at all. Jesus would certainly not endorse intolerance. And they've taken intolerance and hypocrisy to a whole new level. If you're going to be a Bible scholar and teach Sunday school and be Mr. Christian, you better damn well live Christ's example. And I mean live that example. And that means not, Christ believed, he taught his disciples to pay taxes. Christ believed that we should cherish the earth and take care of it. We're supposed to be good stewards of the earth, the environment, and all the creatures in it. All these things, but yet Republicans seem to lose sight of that because they think oil is more important. And that's what Jesus wouldn't be celebrating oil spills. I'm sorry, but he just wouldn't. So you can take that, all you Christian idiots out there, and stick that up your butt. You have no leg to stand on when it comes to the environment or anything. You have a lot to learn from the Bible. A lot, obviously, just in looking up Bible verses on different topics over the weekend, in replying to this email, I learned a lot because I've never sat down. I mean, I was raised Catholic, took communion, but never really sat down and read the Bible. And when you're a kid, you don't care about that stuff. You just want to get in and out of church. You're worried about going out and playing after church. You're not worried about what's really being said in church. And as an adult, I've just never been interested in organized religion, and for a good reason. Because, for one thing, I outgrew Catholicism because, to me, it's a joke religion, as are most organized religions. I'm not an atheist. I'm an agnostic because I'm non-denominational Christian because I do believe in a creator, a God, and obviously his counterpart in evil, be it Satan or whoever. And I do believe in Christ's example. I think that even if Jesus Christ was a fictional character, I think that if you can do good with your faith in Christ, and if you follow Christ's example as it's written in the Bible, if everyone did that, we'd be a much better place. Because, really did that, not just say Jesus this and Jesus that and use Jesus as a shield, or just be a Bible thumper and then not practice Jesus's example, really practice it. In case in point, Ron Paul. And of course, her brother's a big Ron Paul supporter. And the thing that's so hypocritical about Ron Paul is a libertarian, Ayn Randian, Austrian economics type dude on everything except women's reproductive rights. When it comes to personhood, he thinks life begins at conception, and he would love to pass legislation as president to make that the law. And he also would like to overturn Roe v. Wade and outlaw abortion. Now, of course, they think, my wife's relatives there think that abortion is murder, which it's not in the eyes of the law. Now, maybe in the eyes of the Lord it is, but I'm going by the law, because the mistake that's made is Ron Paul wants to be Mr. Small government and everything else. Well, then you should also know, if you're a constitutionalist, that our founding fathers, James Madison, the father of the Constitution, went to great lengths. They went to great lengths to keep religion and state separated because they came from a theocracy and they didn't want us to go down that road again. So for some reason, he thinks that her brother, my wife's brother, thinks that the Constitution came straight out of the Bible, which is a bunch of horse shit, because it didn't. Because maybe some of it did, but they didn't only probably because the wording is what they wanted to convey. And some things in the Bible might be, that's probably what they wanted to achieve. However, they went to great lengths to keep the two separated. We wanted a secular government. That's what they meant to have, is a secular government, not a religious state. Secular government. Hopefully, all the Christians out there can understand what that means. That means that, no, abortion is not murder. It's still legal. And no, life doesn't begin at conception. We don't know when life begins specifically. Yeah, biologically, you could say life begins at conception. That's fine. But we don't know when a soul is present in that. We don't know at what point can you consider that an actual person. A fully developed person is not going to probably happen until much later in the pregnancy cycle. That just makes sense. Same with a soul being there. Who knows when that process happens? So that being said, we don't know if life begins at conception in terms of life, meaning if you kill, if you remove that, and that whatever that is inside the woman at that point, is that really murder? No, the law doesn't consider it murder. So that being said, I'm basing this, I don't want religion in the government. And that's the problem, is these Ron Paul supporters, and Ron Paul wants to inject religion into government in that regard. And they say, oh no, 10th Amendment, the states will handle it. No, well, that's all well and good, but still Ron Paul wants those beliefs, regardless of if it's through the federal or state. He'll say states need to do it because he has to adhere to his constitutionalist ideology for appearance, but trust me, he'll be trying to make that happen, no matter how it happens. If it's federal, state, whatever, he'll take it any way he can get it, I'm sure. But anyway, enough of my rambling. I got to get going. I'm running a little behind this morning, so that daylight savings time did me in a little bit, losing that hour of sleep. Got to get my body adjusted to that schedule. Have a happy Monday, people, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. I'm out.